Dear Father in heaven, we're so thankful that you're a God of wisdom and that you have our best interest in view. Lord, as we share together and think about Alzheimer's and having a sharp mind, that you'll help us to understand points that you want us to understand, and that we'll come away from this with a better understanding of how to take care of this wonderful body that you've given us, because you've said we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, I'll start by seeing if I can share my screen. And once I get my screen shared, then I'll get my PowerPoint up and running. So, keeping your mind sharp, Alzheimer's, memory loss, cognitive decline, and dementia. I remember one time I had a patient come to see me, rather famous Adventist lady, and she was starting to get Alzheimer's. She says, "What can I do?" And I sat down with her and I started going through a bunch of lifestyle things, and I realized that she wasn't going to remember anything I told her. Maybe it was a bit late. But we still have our minds, and so we'll see what we can do to make sure we don't go down that route. It's kind of like a road of no return. Because if you can't cooperate to do lifestyle changes or therapies, then you're in trouble. I like a couple Bible texts that and quotes that bring to mind the importance of memory. In Mark 8:18, Jesus says to his disciples, "Do you not remember?" I'm not sure what emphasis he put on the different words as he said that, but the idea is definitely that they needed to remember. And then Desire of Ages, I found this quote very interesting. Speaking of God, it says, He does not give His children all the directions for their life journey at once, lest they should become confused. He tells them just as much as they can remember and perform. So really, a memory is key to being an efficient worker for God. Because if He tells you something, then you forget it, it's really of no use. And yeah, that's important. Well, after this presentation, you'll know more about the causes and natural home remedies for Alzheimer's and dementia. Really, Alzheimer's is just a subcategory of dementia. Dementia is basically brain failure. We think about heart failure, but here I'm talking about brain failure. So I remember we had a family tell us about their mother. Mother moved to Florida. Oh, it was going to be better weather down there. She got her own little place to live, started living there, but she wasn't real careful about her diet. Sort of hung out with other retirees that went to places to eat, went out to eat. And in time, she started to slip mentally. No longer was she doing good self-care. Forgetfulness clouded her life. And so the children who lived in Michigan said, "Okay, Mom, time to sell the house, come live with us. You're getting old, you're getting frail, you're getting forgetful. We can take care of you up here in Michigan." So she returned to Michigan, and they started feeding her back on good food. No more eating out. Well, in time, she recovered. She got back to being her good old self. You see, all that bad food and bad habits down in Florida had taken its toll on her brain. But returning to good habits returned her brain. If you choose healthy lifestyle habits, you can have healthy bodies that support healthy brains. And so, really, that's the thesis of my talk here. And so what will we cover? We'll cover who gets dementia, little statistics, how your diet affects your brain. That'll be a big portion of what we talk about. And we'll talk about how physical and mental exercise affects your brain. Yeah. And so this will be a good thing for you to think about. And then we'll come in and think about a little psychosocial health and its effect on dementia. Okay, what is dementia? I said it's brain failure. It's really progressive decline in brain function, demonstratable on different tests, usually administered by a psychologist. And key components are loss of memory, loss of intellect, that would be your IQ, loss of rationality, not making good decisions, loss of social skills, getting a little social awkward or withdrawn, and then loss of physical functioning. It goes hand in hand. The brain runs your body, obviously. And it can happen to anyone, but it's more common as people get older. And it's, for example, 65-year-olds, it's 1 in 10 will have dementia. 85-year-olds, 1 in 3. And so you see how this works. There's several subtypes of dementia, and the most common is definitely Alzheimer's. Then we have vascular dementia, frontotemporal dementia, and Lewy body disease. I'm going to kind of lump everything together as either Alzheimer's or dementia because they're the most common, and dementia is sort of the umbrella description that covers all the brain failure syndromes. And just to reiterate, the older you get, the more likely it is. Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be at all. And how do we diagnose it? Well, the gold standard is a piece of your brain under the microscope. That's not a very popular test. So, and what would you see under the microscope? Notice we have normal on one side, diagram here, really not a slide, but diagram. And on the right, we have Alzheimer's. On the left, the cell bodies are nice and clean and pure. On the right, there's a lot of neurofibrillary tangles. What's neurofibrillary tangles? Bunch of junk protein that is collected in the cells. And then there's also things called amyloid plaque. This is more junk protein in the stroma, or the connective tissue, the base tissue of the brain. And so, like I said, though, that's not a test that everybody likes having done on their brain, nor is it easy. Brain's encapsulated in a fairly hard shell. But that said, we will talk quite a bit about neurofibrillary tangles and amyloid plaque and the impact of certain lifestyle habits on whether or not you get amyloid plaque. What makes it go away? What increases it? And so when we keep talking about amyloid or beta amyloid or amyloid plaques, we're talking about this junk protein that gets in the brain and causes problems. Now, 10 signs you may be getting dementia. What would they be? 10 signs. Well, memory loss, for sure. And how bad is the memory loss? Well, when it starts disrupting life, when you're no longer able to carry out the activities of daily living without being hindered. Number 2, challenges in planning or solving problems. Well, not just fear of solving problems and planning, but challenges in doing it. Difficulty completing familiar tasks at home, at work, or at leisure. Confusion with time or place. Sad moment in our lives in our church. Gentleman who had been one of the elders for years and years, had preached regularly, had run the prayer ministry for the church, came to church, and I gave a presentation for a prayer meeting. And after prayer meeting, he told me how wonderful it was that he was visiting at this church and wondering if, what it would be like if he would move his membership there, and thanked me and wondered who I was and what I was doing there. And he was I was like, whoa, okay, wait a minute. Are you going to make it home all right? And so he and his wife jumped in their car. I followed them. They stopped and looked this way and that, seemed confused. I'm like, I better follow them all the way. So I followed them to make sure that they didn't get lost, but they made it home. And then we got together in the church and said, look, time to plan for these folks. Confusion of time and place. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. New problems with words. Can't remember that word. What was that? What was that person's name? What was that? What was my name? Whatever. And difficulty speaking and writing. Misplacing things or losing the ability to retrace steps. One lady, we met her husband. He told us about his wife who wandered out of the house. He got the local academy kids to help look for her. They couldn't find her. He got the local fire rescue to look for her. They couldn't find her. Went on national news. Nobody could find her. 6 months later, they finally found her. 13 miles away, her body died of exposure, had wandered off into some, basically, roadside field, and never to be recovered. Decrease or poor judgment. And where does this particularly come about? There's a million sharks out there that'd like to steal your money. People get their money stolen. Con artists prey on these type people. Withdraw from work or social activities. And changes in mood and personality. There's the top 10. And if you find yourself being described by a number of those, it's time to take note. All right. Now, let's just get right into the meat of the talk. Play on words, not really meat, but, eat more fruit, not more meat. And here's a study that looked at the number of pieces of fruit you ate per day. If you ate more than 3 pieces of fruit per day, your risk of Alzheimer's was 60% lower. Isn't that great? Yeah. Why? It's nutrient dense, as I say here. What's nutrient dense? Well, I mean, if you compare a vegetarian to a meat eater, vegetarians get about 3 times as much good vitamins. Good vitamins like vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin A. And so if you are eating meat, it doesn't have any nutrients, so they're just a bunch of protein and hormones and ridiculous stuff. And you got to be very careful because you won't get enough nutrition. So let's just think about fruits that have been studied. I mean, there's different people who like to study different fruits and say how they affect your risk of Alzheimer's. And so these fruits have been studied, and I'm going to just start out with the berries. Here I got berries and peaches, but I'm especially focusing on the berries in that picture. And then berries are high in antioxidants. They're high in particularly things like vitamin C, different good acidic compounds and alkaline compounds, and so berries are considered super. And strawberries there and blueberries have both been studied and have been shown to help stave off or even reverse dementia. So there you go. Pomegranate's been studied, and I think there was a study done out of Loma Linda on pomegranates. They took a bunch of genetically dementia-prone mice, and they put them on pomegranate, and they had 50% less dementia in the pomegranate group. So pomegranate's good. Apples, figs. Boy, when I found out figs were part of the thing that would help you save your brain, I was happy. I like figs. So I started eating more figs. We have a couple fig trees. They're nice. And they've been producing a few here and there. Cherries, plums. Plums have been touted to be a high antioxidant food, or prunes. Okay, grapefruit. These have all been studied. I got studies on all these. So peppers, and then goji berries. Well, yeah, if you like goji berries, I call them yucky berries. All right, anyway. So fruit is good. Fruit is good. Antioxidants, vitamins, and then just again to put you a graph here, if you're an omnivore, you know, your average vitamin C, vitamin E might be a bit low. If you compare that to vegetarians, plant-based diet, 3 times as much vitamin C, vitamin E, and vitamin A. Wow. So you can't afford to go eating too much meat. It's just not got much food value. All right, now cruciferous and green leafy vegetables. Yeah, they slow cognitive decline. They lower your risk of dementia. So we've gone from fruits, now we've gone to vegetables. And what's cruciferous? This is like the cabbage pictured there. This is like the cauliflower pictured there. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, kohlrabi. I mean, there's quite a few in that family. Probably if you're eating lots of cabbage, you're not eating a lot of other things that aren't good for you. So there's a certain amount of displacement phenomena there, but it's got good nutrients too. And so, yeah. And then the green leafies, I got salad greens there and radishes and all good things to help protect your brain. More fresh fruit and vegetables keep your brain from aging. And that's the topic of this article here. And so go to the fresh fruit and vegetable section. Once you've left the fresh fruit and vegetable section, you're sort of on dangerous ground, perhaps enchanted ground in a supermarket. Really, what are we talking about here? Well, Bible diet, huh? Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and you'll eat the plants of the field. There you go. Yeah, lots of good food. Well, but I don't like eating my vegetables, some people say, or my fruits. Can I make them into juice? I've seen headlines on little pamphlets or books, juice your way to fabulous health. What do I say? Not so according to scientific research. Actually, people who drink juice every day have lower brain volumes and poorer memories. But I thought juice was a wonderful health tonic. Well, you know, Ellen White says that I'm telling everybody everywhere to give up liquid nutrition as much as possible. So, yeah, the studies don't bear out that juices are all that great. Or people get the idea that juicing was good. From Ayurvedic medicine out of India, it's all new age. And why do they drink juice? Well, it helps balance the, what is it, Vita Kappa Lambda or whatever in their body, their fire, and water. I mean, it's, yeah. So, no, we don't need that. Well, you've talked about fruits, you've talked about vegetables. What about other staples? You know, things that we eat a lot of, like whole grains. Well, whole unrefined grains are helpful. Why do I say unrefined? Because refined grains will be part of the problem. When they refine the grains, they take away the nutrients. The nutrients are in the bran, where all the minerals are, or in the germ, where all the vitamins, especially fat-soluble vitamins, are. And that's not good. And beans, a variety of beans, different beans. Beans have a lot of good things for neurotransmitters, precursors to neurotransmitters. They help your brain talk to between its cells better. And so beans are good. They're low in sugar, high in fiber, lots of good fiber in beans. Nuts and seeds are also good because of their concentrated nutrients. And best to have them raw or dry roasted, preferably raw, and as opposed to deep fat fried and salted. And so nuts and seeds provide good, healthy fats and fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, and also minerals, especially things like sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, flax seed, chia seeds, those kind of things. All right, herbs. Are there herbs that are good for Alzheimer's? I mean, we talked about vegetables. Those are really a type of herb, but we're talking herbs you might use in a herbal tea. And I just have a whole list here. You can go to my website and download a handout for this lecture that'll list those for you. And so that way you can go through these in detail, but ashwagandha, brahmi, gachikola, ginkgo biloba, horsetail, otherwise known as shave grass, pepperzia serrata, panax ginseng, red clover. You know, Ellen White was big on red clover for fighting cancer. Sage. Sage is good for COVID, long COVID. It's got beta and alpha pinene in it, that kind of thing. Turmeric, very anti-inflammatory, helps reduce the beta amyloid plaque. So lots of good herbs. And how do you take them? Best as teas. Why teas? Well, if you take them as tablets or capsules, your body has to make tea out of it. That's not your body's forte. Your body's better at having teas come in it already made, and that's good for getting it into your body more efficiently. Okay. All right. Question. What do you think the #1 cause of dementia is? What would you guess? Any guesses? Are you with me?
Inflammation.
Inflammation? Yeah.
Yeah.
And what lifestyle habit would cause more inflammation?
Diet.
Diet?
Eating
What
at-
diet might
Eating
cause?
at McDonald's. Eating at McDonald's.
Yes.
Any
Yeah.
kind of refined foods, sugar,
Yeah.
lots of oil, and fatty stuff, all that stuff.
Yes. Those are all causes of dementia, but I'm thinking of a #1 one. What is the #1 cause? And maybe this is a bit hard of a question.
Meat.
What's that?
Meat.
Meat, definitely meat. Yep, meat, cheese, dairy, all those things.
Sugar.
What about
Sugar.
wrong fats?
What's that?
What about wrong fats?
Yeah, there's bad fats that'll do it. Trans fat, oxidized fats, definitely. Your
I think sugar.
Sedentary lifestyle.
Sugar.
Inactivity.
inactivity. Yeah. Well, what I'm looking for is overeating. Overeating even of the best food. When you overeat, you end up clogging the whole system. Ellen White talks about one individual. She says, I knew that you were forgetting what I said. You couldn't remember what you said. And it's because you overeat. And she talks about the whole thing about all the problems with overeating. And so you can overeat of even the best food. And it increases inflammation in your body, increases amyloid protein, decreases brain blood flow and oxygen. I mean, we're told that we could often eat 1/2 what we do. She told one lady, you eat more than twice what you should. And so when you eat too much food, you cause yourself dementia. She talks about brain workers, office workers, and what they should be doing is fasting 1 day a week, eating less food, having a few days when all they do is eat fruit. And so this is a way of preserving the brain, making sure that you're not eating too much.
But you know, I think it's difficult to know what is too much. You know, it's just like for instance, I think I get too little calories.
Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? We had some friends from Wildwood came to visit us, and we fed them a meal, and they said, all of a sudden, they looked at each other and they said, oh, I just heard my little silver bell ring. And we looked at them and we said, what's your little silver bell? They says, well, that's when I've had enough. And so they prayed that the Lord would sort of give them a nudge when they'd had enough. And that was their little silver bell. And Ellen White talks about eating to match your physical demands. A man working out hard in the woods would eat a lot more than a man sitting in his house reading books and preparing a sermon. and it has a lot to do with how your body burns the calories. The proverb says the sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eat little or much. That's a laboring man. But the person who has nothing to do but to look at a computer all day, they might want to only eat 2 meals a day and be very careful not to eat very much. So it's and part of it's how many calories for sure. We have our whole talk on obesity, which goes into caloric intake, and it's a whole it's sort of a life challenge to know how much to eat and what to eat to match your physical demand. So this morning, our church was doing a church bee to help community people with their trees that blew over in the last big windstorm. And so I was going to be out there moving logs and trees, and so I ate a big breakfast. And so for 3 hours this morning, we were chainsawing and moving logs and cleaning up people's yards. And so I matched my breakfast to what I knew I was going to be doing. On other days when I'm working on my computer, I might eat mostly fruit and not a big meal. So blessed art thou, O land, when thy king is the son of nobles, and thy princes eat in due season for strength and not for drunkenness. For strength and not for drunkenness.
But John, I have to ask you this question. When you are used to eat just a little bit because you are used to be much on the computer, and then you know that you're going to work on the trees that you were saying, don't you feel that you eat too much, that you feel, really bad when you eat, because your stomach is not used to getting more? Can you not, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's true. The other factor that we're told is how well you chew your food determines how much energy you get out of it. And you certainly don't want to overeat because you have a lot of work to do, but chewing your food extra well improves its contribution to your energy. But yeah, I can say that's probably the case that, when I'm just, a weekend warrior and doing just big jobs when the church does it on a Sunday. It does. I probably wouldn't eat as much as the hard laboring men do, because we have hard laboring men in our church too. But I certainly eat more foods that I feel will be more energy providing. So fruit has some energy, but so I ate more. So what did I eat? I ate waffles. We made waffles. I ate waffles along with fruit this morning. And so waffles give you more carbohydrate, which gives you more energy. But it certainly is an interesting discussion. And sometimes it's better to err on the side of eating less. But then there was a man that Ellen White talked to in Australia, a doctor, I think it was Dr. Kress, who he went and read what Ellen White said. That'd be better to eat 2 meals, drop a meal. If you dropped a meal, you'd be better off. So he's eating 2 meals a day. And then he went back and read it. Ellen White says you could eat less and you could drop a meal. So he decided to drop another meal, just eating 1 meal a day. And he started losing weight and not having much energy. And Ellen White wrote to him and said, hey, you're getting to be a fanatic. Put a few things back in your diet. I think he's the one that she said, egg and grape juice might be good for you. Anyway, yeah, it's a definitely a challenge for sure.
But John, you are also thin like me. Don't people tell you, oh, you look so thin? I mean, I hear that all the time.
It's true. It's true. One of my comebacks on that is just because everybody in this world's getting obese doesn't mean it's bad to be thin. Now, it's interesting. Ellen White went off to Envision, and in her vision, she went off to see good old Enoch, as she says, and she saw him on a planet and what he was doing, and then she went to another planet, and she says there were beings on that planet of all different sizes. I thought that's interesting. Not everybody has to be the same.
Right.
And we get into this when people come to us with their children and the doctor has told them your kid's too small. Your kid's not going to grow. You got to feed him more or something. They're just way too small, too thin. And the parents are like low Asian, and they're not even 5 feet tall, and they're comparing these kids to American Caucasian growth charts. I mean, it's ridiculous. Everybody has to fit the same mold. And so my son, he doesn't eat very much. He started out, usually they say when you're 2.5 years old or somewhere around there, if you double the height you are, that's what you'll be when you're full grown. And he was really small at 2.5. We're thinking, oh my, why is he going to be so small? And, but we just kept feeding him his vegan diet, and he went off to academy and this last year. And I mean, he's almost as tall as I am now. He's more than doubled his 2.5 year height. And so they say vegans tend to grow slower and eventually might even grow taller than some of the omnivores. And but if as long as you're even though you're thin, as long as you're not osteoporotic, your bones aren't getting thin, and as long as you still have plenty of strength, chimpanzees are thin, but they're 5 times as strong as a man. Being thin isn't necessarily, an indication of poor health or weakness.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. It's a good question. Then you can go online and buy padding, things you wear under your clothes that make you look bulkier. You can buy something that makes you look like you're pregnant or like you have bigger hips or, Oh dear, people like to look around and see if somebody's different and then pick on them. They call it the tall poppy syndrome. You're different. You might be showing me up because you're different, so they pick on different people. That's a sort of a syndrome of childhood, grade schools. Everybody picks on the different one. So anyway.
I sometimes I have been so tired of people saying, "Oh, so thin you are." I said, "Well, oh, how fat you have become." It's just as it's not nice to tell anyone talk about their weight. So I think we all need to learn that we shouldn't do that. And then some people tell me, "Oh, you're just jealous because you are slim."
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Jealousy? Are you jealousy?
Yeah. So, yeah, Lina, I saw that your hand was up. Sorry that we were not neglecting you.
Oh, that's no problem. I had 2 questions. Well, one question. The first question is about if you're taking certain vitamins and supplements and you have to sort of take them with food. And I find that certain vitamins make me hungry. So then that tends to make me eat when I don't really want to eat. So that was my question there. I'm trying to get off these supplements, but I'm osteopenic, so I have to take something from my bones. And the other thing is not to eat before you go to bed. I find that really helps with intermittent fasting for me. And then that gets me going in the morning. And then I basically, I'm not hungry by lunch, but then I have to take my supplements and, Anyhow, so that's sort of like a question or any ideas on how to deal with that.
Yes, indeed. So supplements tend to be highly processed products from a laboratory. They might even start out as inorganic chemicals or reagents, and they make them into pills. And they're usually super concentrated of one thing. And that's not what your body was made to handle. What we do for osteoporosis, I got a whole lecture on osteoporosis. You can go to my website and watch it. But what we have people do with osteoporosis, besides do all the good lifestyle things, is drink horsetail tea. And that was one of the teas here that we actually had for Alzheimer's as well. You see down there is horsetail. Horsetail is high in silica, and that helps your bones. We have people who've broken bones and need to heal them faster drink horsetail tea. We have people who have connective tissue issues, weak tissues, drink horsetail tea. And so horsetail tea would be a good thing to use instead of all the supplements.
So how much, 1 cup a day, 2 cup a day?
Well, if I knew I was osteoporosis and I wanted to make sure I had enough, I would be taking maybe 4 cups a day. And when would I drink it? I have people drink 2 cups a half hour before breakfast and 2 cups a half hour before lunch.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really good information. I don't think I've ever heard that before, because I have to go for bone scans once a year. And I think I'm going to try that, because then if the horsetail tea is, the miracle tea for me, then definitely I could get off my supplements for sure.
Have you ever broken a bone?
No, when I was younger, I was in a car accident with a broken clavicle, but that's basically it.
Well,
and I'm 72, so I don't, and I exercise quite a bit. So and I work in the garden a lot. But thank you. I'm really grateful for that information. I appreciate it.
Yes, and I just want to say, Walter, you've heard of Walter Veith?
Yeah, of course.
Walter Veith, in his research as a professor, studied the effect of animal protein on sheep. And a very interesting outcome was that when they took these sheep and they fed them normal sheep food, they had good, strong bones, but the bones were lighter. When they fed the sheep animal protein, the sheep's bones got heavier. They got an overabundance of phosphorus or phosphate in their bones, and the bones became weaker. They got heavier. They would have shown up as being denser on a bone scan or a DEXA scan, but they became weaker. And so when you go and get your bones scanned and you're a vegetarian, you're being compared to all the sheep out there that are eating animal protein. And so you might have plenty strong bones. That's why I asked if you ever broke a bone. You may have plenty strong bones, and yet they're lighter, and you're trying to achieve something that may not really be in your best interest or achievable. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The thing that bothers me is to be on supplements for the rest of my life for this. And so I chose a natural, it's called AlgaCal with strontium boost and everything. So, and it's got all the minerals and it comes from a vegetable source. So instead of going on whatever the doctor wanted me to go on for the pills. So, I definitely don't want to have osteoporosis for sure. So, I don't want to go to the extreme. And so I'm very careful. I really monitor that. So that's why I'm on the supplement. But I'll definitely investigate the horsetail.
Yeah, look into that.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
So, John,
sorry.
I was also wanting to ask you about the whole grain. So many people today, they have leaky gut and they react on gluten.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, the culprit is not the whole grain. The culprit is the fact that most farmers, in order that their grain can be harvested on time by the company that owns all the combines and comes through and harvests their grains, they spray the grain with glyphosate. And when they spray it with glyphosate, glyphosate causes leaky gut. Glyphosate changes your gut flora. Glyphosate causes cancer and all kinds of problems. So Roundup. So it's they do it to beans, they do it to potatoes, they do it to grains. And so you definitely want to get your whole grains organic, which assumably is supposed to not have Roundup.
So have you seen that people who have changed to organic flour don't react anymore?
Yeah, me personally. When I first discovered that I was gluten intolerant, at least I thought it was gluten intolerant, I quit eating all, wheats. I started switching over to just the non-gluten grains. And then I found out I reacted to potatoes the exact same way. And what kind of reaction? I got blisters in my mouth and hemorrhoids and bleeding. And it's like, this isn't good. So when I quit anything that was typically sprayed with glyphosate, I didn't realize that was it initially. Then I didn't have any problems. And I thought, why are potatoes the same as causing me the same problem as wheat? There's some connection here that has nothing to do with gluten. And then there was a what would we say? A journalist out in Iowa, Jeffrey Smith, who first he made a whole career out of saying how bad genetically modified foods were. And then he realized people's problem was the reason they genetically modified the foods was so they could spray them with Roundup. He realized it was the Roundup. So he did a whole documentary on Roundup, and it was very interesting. And so I thought, okay, let me try eating just organic glyphosate-free wheat. And it gave me absolutely no problem. And then I got organic glyphosate-free potatoes. It gave me absolutely no problem. And so I think the leaky gut comes from all the chemicals. There's a number of things that make wheat a problem. It's not just the glyphosate, though. Another one is that during the last few weeks before harvest, they also, some farmers will spray the wheat with high nitrogen fertilizer to artificially up its laboratory well, they take the wheat to the lab and test it for protein, so it looks like it has more protein, and so that's a problem. And then they've also instead of stone grinding your wheat into flour, they roll it just like rolled oats, but they just keep rolling it until it turns into flour. It's a wet process. It's subject to mold and mildew and dampness and so mildew and mold. So this is a big problem. And the other thing is they ship it from country to country. You never know where your wheat came from. And when it goes overseas, they spray it down with methyl bromide. But then this is a problem like in Saudi Arabia. They import a lot of grain. Well, there's a lot of aflatoxins from mold in the grain. So they have to test the grain when it comes in and see what its levels are of aflatoxins from sitting in big barges and going around the world. So there's a lot of issues with mold and toxins from chemicals in the wheat that contribute to why it causes leaky gut. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So you don't think we need to go back to the old-fashioned grains? I mean, they have done so much to the grains since the 60s or something like that.
Yeah, if you can get some old-fashioned grains, that's all right. They started hybridizing wheat in the 70s here in America, and then they've been genetically modifying wheat for the last 10, 15 years, especially in Australia. But so I grew up on a wheat farm, and my grandfather developed seed wheats. We're talking, there was a time when 70% of the farms in America were growing his wheats. And he would grow them. He would go out in the field and just select interesting new varieties that happen naturally. And his wheats are still available. We just bought a box of his wheat from a farm up in North Dakota, called Clark Cream Wheat. Clark Cream Wheat. And so it's the old, heirloom, and so we're going to grind it and make it into bread one of these days. Or we might plant some of it in our garden.
So what about yeast?
Well, yeast is a problem. Yeast is definitely a problem because not only have they genetically modified it, but it's a close cousin to mold. It's a filamentous fungi, and it has aflatoxins and mycotoxins. People who eat yeast-raised bread have, some studies show, they have a higher incidence of cancer. The children of Israel were given a special diet for special occasions that included unleavened bread, avoiding yeast or any raising agent. And so this yeast is called Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And it's the same yeast, it's nutritional yeast, the same yeast as for raising bread, the same yeast as for making beer, probably different sub-varieties, but it's all Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And people who eat it get a lot more MSG as well. It releases a lot of free glutamate, and both the L and the D forms, and the different forms, D forms are worse. So that's loaded with MSG. So nutritional yeast is not nutritional. It's hazardous. Some people say, well, we take it because we get vitamin B12 from it. The only reason it has vitamin B12 is not because it's naturally there. It's because they sprayed it on it just like they spray it on cornflakes. They added it. It's been enriched or fortified. And it's just a vitamin pill on your yeast. So yeast is not that great.
It seems like it's best to keep on to waffles made on buckwheat and soy.
Yeah, there you go. Yep, we make buckwheat, soy, we use sorghum grain, we use rice, brown rice. We'll put in buckwheat flour. And if we can get gluten-free oats, we'll put those in sometimes a little bit. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Bon appetit.
Bon appetit. All right, to never forget, this is an interesting Proverbs. Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me, lest I be full and deny thee and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my Lord, my God in vain. So when you overeat, you forget God. This gets back to that thing where I said that overeating was the biggest cause of dementia. And here it is in the Bible as well. People who have taught us a lot about overeating or not overeating are the Okinawans. They have 75% less Alzheimer's. What is their diet like? They eat 40% fewer calories than Americans and other westernized countries. And so eating less food. See, the Japanese have a different approach to food. Their table spread is more focusing on how it looks and how it is presented. And they'll have all these little tiny dishes. They sort of go overboard on complicated mixtures, but they eat a lot less. And so this has been to their benefit. Foods that will harm your brain. We started out with fresh fruits and vegetables, and then we went to grains. Now, and nuts and seeds. Now we're going to go into stuff that harms your brain. And you guys have already talked about this because when I asked you what the number one thing was. So here we have, fast foods. And so you have white bread. And white bread is going to cause what we call glycation end products. It raises your blood sugar. It'll give a diabetic high blood sugar. It'll give you advanced glycation end products, which is really modified proteins that have been oxidized and sugar coated, and that can just turn into amyloid. We got these highly processed proteins like this hot dog. Processed meat is really hazardous to your health. There's all kinds of problems with it. It increases diabetes by a large percentage, just little bits. You know, that hot dog there might be 3 ounces. That'll increase your risk of diabetes by 60%. It does all kinds of things to your body, and diabetes increases Alzheimer's. So, and then you have your fried potatoes and the frying process. The oils deteriorate. It makes acrylamide. The oxidized oils are called peroxidated oils or free radicals, and that causes problem in your system. I mean, these type of meals are just designed to cause Alzheimer's. And then there's fermented dairy, cheese. I mean, pizza has been shown to cause Alzheimer's. And so you have a crust that's probably raised with baking soda, which destroys the B vitamins and causes protein malnutrition because you can't digest protein because your gut is made too alkaline when it needs to be highly acid to digest protein. And so the protein might go into your bloodstream undigested and it can become amyloid. All kinds of problems with pizza. And then you guys mentioned sugar. Sugar is definitely inflammatory and it plugs the brain. It causes the blood to get thick. It makes the blood cells all stick together. And it causes more glycation end products. And then there's dairy, like ice cream that's been mixed with sugar, milk and sugar, which raises your cholesterol really high for a much longer period of time. And the sugar and the oxygen in the ice cream oxidizes the cholesterol. So you get a big load of oxidized cholesterol. Your brain is one of the biggest cholesterol deposits in your body. And so if it's all oxidized, then your brain won't function properly. So these are all foods that definitely will affect your brain and increase your risk of Alzheimer's. So we'll pick on these a little bit more specifically. Meat eating increases your risk of Alzheimer's threefold, 3 times higher risk. And that said, it's the fat, it's the protein, it's the lack of nutrition, but it's also the bugs. What do I mean by bugs? How about prions? Because in autopsies, they don't do much autopsies on Alzheimer's patients. Alzheimer's patients waste away in some locked up unit in some nursing home, and they don't all wonder why they died and want to do an autopsy. But when they have done autopsies, in one series, 13% of Alzheimer's patients really had mad cow disease. In America, I don't know what it's like over there, but you know, England had this problem. Lots of mad cow disease. Most of the time, our cows don't get old enough to reveal whether they had mad cow disease or not, but they could have it. And out here we have deer, right where I'm at. They have to test the deer. The hunters go out. We see deer every day. Hunters will go out and kill their deer. They have to take it in and have it tested for mad cow disease, otherwise known in deer as chronic wasting. So a lot of the meat eaters are getting Alzheimer's, but which is really prion disease or mad cow disease or Creutzfeldt-Jakob, as we say for humans. And so that's kind of a scary thought. Now, what about the fat in food? How does that affect the brain? Here I got a brain diagrammatic, and I got this fancy chart. Notice we have percent oxygen on the brain, 70, 80, 90, 100%. Across the bottom, I have 0 hours, 6 hours, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And here I have time after eating a high-fat meal. What does a high-fat meal do to the oxygen on your brain? If the oxygen on your brain gets below 90%, you're going to be suffering. And if the doctor discovers that, he'll be putting you on oxygen. But let's just take the brain away here, and let's just take and eat a high-fat meal at time 0 and follow what happens to the oxygen on the brain. Notice that the oxygen on the brain falls below 70% at 6 hours. What's more, it doesn't return to normal for 3 whole days. You think you're going to remember anything during that time? And this is a high-fat meal that's particularly animal fat, high-fat meal. But most people, they're going to have another high-fat meal the next day. And so the oxygen is going to go down again. They're going to have another high-fat meal the next day. I mean, this just keeps going on and on. And the moral of the story is some people have never had a fully functioning brain. Now,
John, I have a question.
yes.
What about eating like a young coconut that's full of, fatty, substances in there?
Yes.
Plant-based, is that okay?
If you eat the coconut with all its natural fiber, and you don't make it more than 10% of your diet, then there's it's going to be a lot less of a problem. But if you're eating coconut oil that's been processed out of the coconut, then you're looking at a much bigger problem. And it has to do with the percentage of fat in your diet. You wouldn't want to eat 100% of your diet as coconut, even just the fresh coconut out of the young coconut. But as a proper proportion of your diet and not refined, then you're doing much better.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
because you hear this, that we should use 1 to 3 tablespoons of coconut every day, and if you have Alzheimer, you should go up to 6 tablespoons a day.
are they saying coconut oil or coconut shreds?
Coconut oil, I
oil.
believe. Yeah, there's
Oil.
a doctor named Dale Bredesen, and he really has done, I guess, a lot of research on Alzheimer's, and he recommends coconut oil. I think taking 2, 3, 4 tablespoons a day. And
Yeah.
he says that like almost 100% positive results in all his patients.
Yeah. It all started down in Florida when some lady doctor put her Alzheimer's husband on coconut oil and it hit the news. And I think it was a ploy by the World Economic Forum to be able to trap third world countries into an industry that would make them have to borrow money, and they had to get a product out. I mean, when I've looked at all the studies on coconut oil and Alzheimer's, there is absolutely no evidence that it does any good whatsoever. But it still is out there in the media, and I think it's World Bank or something trying to keep the third world countries with an industry that they can tap into their finances. That said, coconut oil, if I eat anything with coconut oil, I feel like my brain is taking a real hit. It's like, man, why am I so foggy? And on my website, I have an article on coconut oil where one lady wrote in and said, yeah, we had she was at a Adventist lifestyle center. And she said, yeah, we had a famous Adventist lifestyle doctor came here to help us out in one session. And she went around the campus telling everybody how great coconut oil was, while meanwhile she was forgetting her keys here and forgetting where she was there. And they said, this isn't working for her. And she says the Lord told her it's because it's saturated fat. I had this experience of I was in the islands, and my aunt, my dad's sister, had married an islander, and so me and this and what would be my uncle went around the island and we collected coconuts. We collected for days. We collected coconuts until we had a whole yard, probably a 30 by 30 foot front yard full of coconuts, at least one deep, if not two. And then we cracked them open, ground out the flesh, put it in a pot, made coconut oil. We heated it up, extracted the coconut oil, and it was this slightly yellow, totally liquid oil that never got hard, even in the air-conditioned house. And we used it in cooking. Well, whole yard full of coconuts made about a quart jar of coconut oil. So that's highly concentrated. Well, then I came back to the United States, and there was my dad was building a greenhouse, and he said, well, we got to have passive solar heat in our greenhouse. So we went down to a corn chip factory and bought 12 55-gallon barrels from them for passive solar heat. And it got to be my job to prepare the barrels, and I took the lids off, and they were full of white, greasy sludge. And I'm like, what is this? So I looked on the barrel lid. It said it was coconut oil. Not only was it coconut oil, but that it had been hydrogenated. It had 8 ingredients. I was thinking now the corn chip packages with their list of ingredients don't transfer these 8 ingredients from the coconut oil to their package. It had BHA and BHT and tocopherols, vitamin E analogs. It had been, I can't even remember what all the 8 ingredients were, but I remember counting them and thinking, wow, a bunch of different chemical names, And, well, recently they've been selling coconut oil to everybody, and it isn't the light liquid yellow stuff that we made from scratch in the islands. It's this white sludge stuff that I cleaned out of barrels, and it doesn't even melt at room temperature. It's always white sludge. So I think it's a big scam and a health hazard, and what they're selling you isn't pure. So I talked to people, as I went around recently, I talked to people from the Philippines. I says, help me out. I remember when I was in the Philippines, you guys burn coconut oil in your diesel engines in what they call a jeepney, a little bus. And they said, yeah. And I said, have you made coconut oil? They said, yeah. And I says, did you make it the same way we did? Yeah. And we described it and talked about it. And I said, did your coconut oil ever get to be white sludge? They says, no. I mean, if it turned white sludge and you tried to burn it in a little diesel engine in your bus, it would plug the engine up. And they have that problem in North Dakota with diesel going solid at 40 below zero. Anyway, so the stuff they're selling for coconut oil is a hoax. It's garbage. And it's probably the same stuff I was cleaning out of barrels. And so I would avoid coconut oil. I would say it's a hazard to your health. It increases. And the studies show it increases inflammation in your body just like lard. And it's very high in saturated fat. You can see this all in my article on it anyway.
Well, I say praise the Lord, because I think it tastes terrible. But what I use it for? I use it for my skincare. I take 1 drop of an oil and use it for skincare.
That's good. Yeah, what you put on your skin is different than what you put in your body. And
Right.
another good one is shea butter. But it's high in saturated fat too, for your skin. So it's best to avoid oils. You'll see on my website an article called "Oil in My Bread," and I was studying oil. Somebody asked me about that. They said, "What about putting oil in my bread?" And I said, "Well, let me research it." And I came across 2 very fascinating articles. The reason they were fascinating, they were the exact same researchers. They had done 2 groups of baking bread, and instead of making it all into 1 article and comparing the 2 different ways, they made it into 2 articles. And I wondered why until I read it, and I realized what a dramatic effect was being had. And what they did is, in the first article, they studied what happened when they made bread and when they baked it, and how it affected the oxidants or the free radicals in the bread. And they compared their baking and their heats and so forth. And at the end of the study, they reported this is how much free radicals are in the bread. In the second study, they made the same bread, but all they did different was add a little oil. When they added the oil in the second article, the free radical numbers were 10 times higher than the bread that had no oil in the first article. I was blown away. I'm like, that's amazing. Putting oil in bread made that much difference, because, you cook bread, you bake it 350 degrees or, I forget what Celsius, but anyway, you're not really heating it that hot. It's nothing like frying, but it still greatly oxidized the oils. And yeah. Okay, so speaking of oxidized oils, oxidized cholesterol, remember I said ice cream. Like they say, don't feed ice cream to your dog, it'll kill it. Eat it yourself. But that's a saying we have. But anyway, oxidized cholesterol is a driving force for Alzheimer's, because as that product sits on the shelf, the oxygen is next to the cholesterol in it. There's eggs and milk and cream and sugar in it. And this raises the number of free radicals in it. So people, if we take an animal and we feed them oxidized cholesterol, and then after 1 day, we kill the animal and look in their heart, they will have lesions in their hearts, in their blood vessels, that would lead to plaque, lead to heart attacks. In 1 day, it causes lesions in blood vessels. And so it's been an interesting study to look at that. And so it would cause that in the brain. It would be leading you toward Alzheimer's. And of course, there at the bottom, I have the study that about the whole connection between Alzheimer's and oxidized cholesterol.
I can see that Lida have a question for you, John.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, before we move on, going back to the coconut, and are you familiar with Barbara O'Neill and her lectures?
I sure am.
Because Barbara O'Neill really talks a lot about coconut oil, and she has different studies, and she really promotes it as well as oils. And it's, you know, this is the whole controversy that we're having. You know, you're saying this one thing, and then Barbara O'Neill says another thing, Seventh-day Adventists, and then because I had been following Dr. John McDougall program for a long time, where there was definitely no oil, and I was having good results, and my skin was getting a little bit dry. But anyways, for a couple of years I stayed on it, and then I listened to Barbara O'Neill, and I started using coconut oil, and you know, that's sort of like, I don't cook with it, but I use it sometimes. So the controversy continues, and so it's like we all have to figure out who's telling the truth here, and who pushes the product. I don't
Great
know.
question. Yes, very good. And that's a very important question. And somebody recently contacted me and said, we need to have a forum and talk about all these controversial things that we're having differences amongst different health, you know, medical missionaries. And so I have, you know, I know Barbara O'Neill. I've talked with her. I've written her recently. We differ on one big thing, and that is everything I do, I try to go and put it past the spirit of prophecy. Where does the spirit of prophecy weigh in on grease? Coconut oil is grease. Margarine is grease. Butter is grease. She says we should prepare our vegetables free from grease. And so there's no argument. Coconut oil is grease. I mean, it's solid at room temperature. It's high in saturated fat. And so I exclude it based on that.
And I have always thought it's best to get it the way the Lord has created it. When people take something away or add, it will always be some kind of complication in the body.
Yes. Yeah, it's highly refined. Like I said, it took a whole yard full of coconuts to make one quart jar, wasn't even totally full, of coconut oil. So you're talking.
So what about coconut milk used in recipes?
So coconut milk is theoretically just shredded coconut blended up with water. And so we use that a bit. There's certain recipes we'll use it in, you know, some Indian dishes like to have it in it. We'll use it sometimes. We'll make a fruit salad, might put a little bit on it as a dressing. And we usually look for the ones that are nothing but coconut and water. No carrageenan, no gargum, no, you know, natural flavors. And you can find it at Asian stores. It's nothing but water and coconut. So we do use some of that. Again, I would use the rule again about the nuts and seeds that you don't make it more than 10% of your diet. But that's one way to use it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. All right, snacking. Don't eat between meals. The pleasure of doing so will eventually be forgotten. Sort of a play on words there. But anyway, if you maintain a regular meal schedule, this is huge. So for my Neurodegenerative patients, when their brains are struggling, you don't want to mess their brains up by messing with their circadian rhythms. You don't want to be changing when they do things during the day. Their meal times want to be as regular as clockwork. Ellen White said better 5 minutes early than 5 minutes late. And when you do that, it makes it so that your body prepares for the meal. It gets the insulin out ahead of time so that when the food hits the stomach, hits the bloodstream, it's ready. It gets the digestive juices out ahead of time so the stomach is all ready. It gets the blood flowing to the stomach right on time. It makes it so that when your meal hits the stomach, it'll be digested perfectly. The whole body's ready for it. If you're varying the time when you eat your meals, the stomach never knows when something's going to hit it. And so it's always out of whack. And what it does is it messes with your melatonin and your cortisol internal clocks. And when you do that, it raises the inflammation in your body. For example, rheumatoid arthritis patients typically have messed up circadian rhythms that are controlling their melatonin and their cortisol. And so the melatonin hits at the wrong time, cortisol hits at the wrong time, wrong levels, and it's a hallmark of why they have their disease. So for neurodegenerative patients, we want their brains to be able to expect a meal at a certain time. Food will be in there, and then you have at least 5 hours between meals so the brain can clear out. And when it clears out, then it can have a time of recuperation, of freedom from having to deal with foods. It's kind of like if you're always pouring grease down the drain in your house, pretty soon the drain will get plugged up. But if you pour grease one day and then pour hot water another time, you keep cleaning it out, then, you don't want to do either one of those. But anyway, you want to make sure the body has a good schedule. And so eating between meals just keeps the pipes plugged all the time. And you end up with more problems. Whereas avoiding those snacks between meals has an anti-aging effect on your brain. So be aware that timing is important. Ellen White used to talk about when people went to camp meeting, they needed to keep a regular schedule for their meals because if they didn't, they'd all get sick. A lot of importance put on good scheduling.
So, John, what are you doing when it's suddenly it's Sabbath, you're going to church, and they're having potluck, and they are eating at a different time than you are used to, or you are invited to dinner somewhere, and that's not on the regular time? What are you doing?
Yeah, good question. Thank you, because you're right. And there's always somebody popping up trying to feed you at an odd time, and so there's a couple principles I use to try to deal with that. Of course, I have a lot of freedom because I'm just working for the Lord and I don't have a schedule that anybody else is imposing on me. I'm not trying to go to work at 8, get off at 5, and so forth. So I have control of my schedule through the week. So I just make sure the schedule I have through the rest of the week matches those appointments that I have no control over, which is Sabbath. And so I make it so that if there's, if I would expect that every week or every other week we'll have fellowship meal at church, and I would want to attend that my meals the rest of the week are at that time, so that when Sabbath comes, it's just my usual time. It makes breakfast, match that schedule and we only eat 2 meals a day, so that works that way. The other thing is this. I treat it like an airport schedule. So when I was in the operating room, so as an orthopedic surgeon, you're always in the operating room, and whether it's trauma or total knee replacements or whatever, nothing goes right because the general surgeon has an emergency come in and bumps you, and you were supposed to operate at 10, but now you're operating at 12, and you operate right through your lunch hour. What do you do? I'm hungry, but I operated when I was supposed to be eating. Well, treat it like an airport schedule. That airplane left. You're not bringing him back. There'll be another airplane coming in at your next mealtime. Wait till the next. If you can't eat at your usual time, skip until you come to the next scheduled mealtime. Much better. I mean, Ellen White talks about skipping meals as being good, or maybe fasting one meal a day or fasting one day a week. And so just consider it your health fast and go on. And if you go to church and they prevail upon you to eat when you're not supposed to eat, just say, hey, you know, I'm fasting and praying today. I got to get closer to the Lord. They'll usually let you do that.
Amen.
That answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Healthy gut bacteria. And people eat more fat, it messes with their gut bacteria, pushes them toward putrefying bacteria. People who eat good fresh fruits and vegetables, it pushes them toward healthier bacteria. Bacteria do have a lot to do with how your brain does. And this has become a lot of, you know, they call it the gut-brain axis. And it is important. And glyphosate messes with your bacteria in your gut. Totally. And so avoiding glyphosate is important, but the more fresh fruits and vegetables, and also the more good fiber. What are sources of good fiber? Well, fresh fruits and vegetables, but things like carrots, things like oat bran, things like chicory, green bananas. I say green. Bananas that aren't so ripe have more good fiber in them. The fiber tends to deteriorate as they get overripe for your gut. And anyway, looking at you know, your fructose oligosaccharides or whatever they are, those are very good for having healthy bacteria. And it takes a while to develop good healthy bacteria. There's sort of a war goes on when you start changing your diet. You know there's a war going on because you can hear the cannons going off. More gas. And so that's a factor that's coming more into popular discussion these days. How about big varieties? This is a problem, especially mixing fruits and vegetables. Ellen White talks about this, that mixing fruits and vegetables lays the groundwork for dementia and brain fog. Why is that? Well, we don't know exactly. We speculate. Here's my speculation. I've had different angles on this. One is there's a lot different fiber in vegetables than in fruit. So the digestive time is different. Vegetables take quite a bit longer, maybe twice as long to digest as fruit. So when it's all sitting in your gut, trying to digest, the fruits will have already finished digesting and might be tipping toward fermentation while your vegetables are still just getting their digestion underway. Another thing is that somebody pointed out to me is that there's different probiotic bacteria that are associated with fruits versus what are associated with vegetables. And so that could be a factor also. It's also interesting that the fruits usually grew on the vegetables, right? I mean, not that you eat every plant that grew fruit, but it is a vegetable is a stem, like celery, like asparagus, or a leaf, like kale or lettuce, or it's a root, like a carrot or a potato. Whereas a fruit is what grew from the flower and usually has the seed. Avocados are fruit, peppers are fruit, cucumbers are fruit, squash is a fruit. And I don't know what an okra or a green bean is, but anyway. So you have fruits and vegetables. If you mix them, it causes inflammation in you. If you have too great of a variety, it has, so you think of a variety of food. Each food has its own antigens, its own characteristic surface proteins that your body has to identify. And when you overwhelm the body with a huge load of varied antigens, as in the meal you see prepared there, then it totally confuses your body and can lead to leaky gut, can lead to food intolerances, to antibody autoimmune responses to the different foods. And so Ellen White talks about eating three or four food items at most at one meal. And I would say that's probably dishes. So keeping it simple is very helpful. So when you go to a potluck, you have to remember this. You know, you see people go through the potluck and they try to get a dip of everything that was brought there. My strategy is this. First thing I do is I go to the potluck line and I do what I call a drive-by. I look up and down the table and see what's available. Then I decide, first of all, okay, which am I going to fare better on? Eating fruits today or vegetables today? And, maybe there's really nice broccoli there, broccoli salad, and then there's really nice, beans and rice. And I think, okay, I'm going to mix those three. That'll be my three things. And so I'll pick those three things. I'll get the broccoli, get the rice, get the whatever, and I make my first pass. If I'm still hungry after eating that, I come back and I eat the exact same three things, just a little more of them. I don't see how many varieties I can get in. I don't mix fruits and vegetables. I don't, and Ellen White says you do not need dessert. She says that. Anyway, so complex combinations are a challenge.
But John, when you're saying just like tomatoes and squash and paprika, all those have seeds, but we usually put them with the vegetables. You don't put them in a fruit meal.
Yeah, we've got bad habits. So what I've had people argue with me, and I say, well, what do you think Ellen White meant when she said don't mix fruits and vegetables? Because they always say, well, it's not going to be my tomatoes and onions, because I love tomatoes with onions. All my Italian spaghetti sauce is tomato and onions. And she couldn't have meant that because we all do it all the time. Because she couldn't mean anything that we always do. It's got to be something else. I'm thinking, well, what is it then? But so we make, on our website, we have a recipe for like savory fruit salad. And in the recipe, we say put in tomatoes and avocados and peppers and cucumbers and olives and a can of beans and a little hummus for dressing. And there you got a savory fruit salad. Or on the other hand, just make your vegetable salad, nothing but vegetables. So you can pick your roots like carrots, beets, kohlrabi. You can have your stems, which are like asparagus and celery. You can have your leaves. You have flowers like cauliflower, broccoli, artichokes, and just stick with those for onions. You can stick with those for your salad if it's going to be a vegetable salad. Another thing we do as Adventists, we make haystacks. We have all these little dishes of things you can put together, and usually has a base of either corn chips or rice. I usually go for the rice. I always go for the rice. I don't go for corn chips. But anyway, rice and beans, and then, well, you just take the dishes of the fruit stuff. If you're going to make it a fruit haystack, or if it's going to be a vegetable haystack, you just take from the vegetable little dishes and make it a vegetable haystack. So yeah, you got to keep them separate. We first learned about this. We were up in Maine, and we'd been doing medical missionary lecturing for maybe a year or two. And we went to these people's house, and they said, we write a health magazine. At least we used to. And maybe we want to restart it, but maybe you can help us. But I want you to look at some of the back issues. So he handed me a bunch of the back issues, and I said, great. And I sat down, I started reading through them. And here was an article on mixing fruits and vegetables, and had a big chart. Total fruits that can't be mixed, total vegetables that can't be mixed, and then a bunch of neutral ones that they claimed could be mixed. And me, being a researcher and having to have evidence, I said, wow, that's interesting. This is great. This is something I would, I like, and I've always wondered about. Can you give me the evidence? Do you have a white paper on it? Do you have an article by a research showing why this is this way? He sort of hung his head and said, well, no, I got this from so-and-so's book. And, I'm a little embarrassed that I published that, because now I wouldn't do that. And he says, I went back and looked at Ellen White's writings, and there's no holes in what she said. She talks about what she ate. She never mixed fruits and vegetables. She says at one meal I ate my greens and my bread, another meal I ate my tomatoes and my bread. She never herself mixed them. And then she has these 5 different big quotations saying not to mix them. And he says, now I don't mix them. I said, so what don't you mix? He says, well, we don't put tomatoes in our salad. We don't put cucumbers in our salad if it's a vegetable salad. We don't put avocado in our salad if it's a vegetable salad. I said, really? So I said to my wife, we should do that. My wife's like, there goes our whole meal plan. Anyway, we started doing it, and all of a sudden, I was feeling a lot better. I used to eat a big salad and feel a little bloated. I'm thinking, what's the matter with me? Aren't I a salad eater? What's my problem? And now, when I eat the salad, no bloating, no problems with digestion, no feeling like that was tough to eat. Glad I ate it for the nutrition, but it's not my favorite. Now it's, hey, this works good. So there's my take on it.
Okay, John.
It's a big change, isn't it? It's a challenge because you're used to mixing all these dishes where you're making a casserole or an entree and it's got a mixture. Yeah, it's a challenge. So what do you do if you're making an entree and you want to remove the tomatoes and have something sour? Well, you could do things like rhubarb. That would be sour. Now, some things Ellen White talked about mixing, like lemon juice she put on her greens or lemon juice in her water. It seems that some of the seasoning juices like that, it was okay to mix if it was just the juice. So we'll put lemon juice on our greens. I mean, it makes sense scientifically that vitamin C helps you digest and absorb things like iron. When it comes to seasoning, sometimes we'll put a pinch of herbs, which would technically be vegetable, into something that isn't really vegetable. But for the most part, we pretty much stick with totally separating these things. All right, the next one that's a real hit to the brain is monosodium glutamate. Monosodium glutamate. Glutamate is really just an amino acid, a part of most proteins. The challenge comes when it becomes isolated all by itself and you get it in very large doses. And those doses would be large in things like the pictured products there. Soy sauce. Why does soy sauce have so much glutamate in it? Soybeans, in and of themselves, have about 20% of their amino acids in their protein as being glutamate. Now, when glutamate is in long chains with other amino acids, it's not monosodium glutamate. It's just protein, and that's fine. But when it gets separated, and especially combined with sodium, then it's monosodium glutamate. So Bragg's Look at Aminos or soy sauce would be 20 to 21% monosodium glutamate. And when a soy is fermented, as in the case of soy sauce, then it tends to have a higher component of D-monosodium glutamate or D-glutamate. And then you see I have pictured there nutritional yeast. We already talked about that. Notice the soy milk. If you read on the soy milk, it'll say natural flavors. That will be lots of monosodium glutamate. It'll say carrageenan. That'll be high in monosodium glutamate. It might say spices. That usually hides a lot of monosodium glutamate. Then I have apple cider vinegar there. Anything that's fermented will tend to produce free glutamate. And then cheese, which also has lots of naturally occurring monosodium glutamate. So monosodium glutamate causes oxidation in the brain, causes brain fog, can cause holes in your blood-brain barrier. Monosodium glutamate is an excitotoxin. It overexcites the neurons to the point of death. And that's certainly going to lead to Alzheimer's. And yes, the studies show it increases Alzheimer's. Caffeine, and it decreases mental performance. Oops, what happened? There we go. Caffeine decreases mental performance. And for people who've been taking caffeine regularly, they are merely being returned to the baseline that they started out before they ever had their first drink of caffeine. In other words, they get a spike of energy, but then they go into doldrums. They go into a lower ebb. And so after a while, as they become addicted, their caffeine only returns them to where they started from in the initial first time they used it. It disturbs the sleep. And studies of spiders, given the amount of caffeine in their body weight per what a human would use, they are not able to return to normal in their ability to make webs for 3 whole days. And so it's a real problem. All right, alcohol also causes loss of neurons and increases amyloid plaque. We can kind of figure that. Another quote for you here. It is not for kings a lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor strong drink. Why? Lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. So alcohol makes you forget. Modern chemicals that threaten the brain, herbicides, pesticides. We've been talking about glyphosate. There's also pyrethrins that increase problems. Formaldehyde, arsenic. Arsenic is in chickens and eggs that are produced commercially as a dewormer. Aluminum, boy. So the horsetail tea helps kick aluminum out of your body. That's one of the reasons we use horsetail tea for Alzheimer's. But aluminum is in injections like vaccines. Aluminum is in cheese. About 2% of cheese is aluminum as a flocculating agent to make the cheese into a block instead of a soup. Aluminum is in baking dishes. It's in baking sodas. It's in raising agents. Yeah. Fluoride in toothpaste and in green tea and black tea, and there's mercury that's in fish and in amalgams and in vaccines. There's bromide that's used to kill bugs in your food as it's transported from some other country to your country in a barge. There's bromide in fire retardants, in medicines, as a dough conditioner for most breads. Medications have lots of modern chemicals like fluoride and bromide. Anesthetics are largely fluoride based, and this all leads to more Alzheimer's. And tobacco. There are a lot of problems with tobacco. Now, let's put it in perspective. Speaking about herbicides and pesticides, what food do you think, if you went to the supermarket, would have the greatest amount of herbicides in it? Anybody guess? What foods would have the highest amount of herbicides and pesticides? You went to a supermarket, you want to find a food that has the most pesticides. What do you think it would be? Did I lose y'all?
Junk food.
Junk food?
What about
Well,
seafood?
seafood? Yeah, seafood has a lot, especially mercury. But I'll just put it up here. Beef is the most dangerous food for herbicide contamination and ranks 3rd in insecticide contamination. Those cows are eating those products that were sprayed with all those chemicals. They're eating the grain, they're eating the corn, they're eating the soybeans, they're eating the foods that were contaminated with all these chemicals. And so they have the most. And so that comes from that book, Beyond Beef by Jeremy Rafkin. Anyway. All right, to mold exposure and your risk of dementia. People who live in moldy houses, moldy basements, near compost piles, anywhere where there's mold that's going to affect the brain. It erases the inflammation in the brain. It has aflatoxins and biotoxins and all kinds of things. A lot of foods have mold in them. Peanut butter is hard to find without any mold in it. But there's a lot of fermented foods. People don't realize how many foods are fermented. Soy sauce, vanilla, chocolate, brown rice syrup, cheese, wine, vinegar, brown rice syrup. Did I mention that already? Yeah. And so when you eat fermented food, it's loaded with stuff that's going to cause inflammation in your body and lead to amyloid plaque.
Did I hear right now that you said brown rice?
Brown rice syrup.
Syrup, okay.
The sweetener. Yep. Yep. And a lot of grains that are imported, once they've gone across the ocean, they get moldy. Yeah, okay. Hypersexuality. When people are hypersexual, ejaculation expels a lot of zinc. And here I got a picture of a guy who wrote this book intended for pleasure. He was a big Christian author that claimed that in order to make sure that you didn't go to bed with anger when the sun went down, that you better be having a relationship in bed to prove that. And he died of Alzheimer's. And so it's the zinc and zinc depletion that creates the dementia. Dementia risk increases with either lack of sleep or with too much sleep. Notice my chart there, too short of sleep, and the risk of dementia goes up by 164%. Too long asleep, the next column, 123% higher risk of dementia. People who take sleeping pills, 66% higher risk of dementia. So the pills are not helpful. What you really need is regularity in bedtime. That improves your memory. Getting to bed by 9, much better than getting to bed by 11, improves your chances of keeping your brain as you get older. All right, and what it has to do with is your melatonin. Because people who are out at night under artificial lighting, they don't get as good a melatonin. When they don't get their melatonin, then they have more inflammation in their body. If they spend the night on the TV or a computer or a device that puts blue light in their eyes, it wipes out their melatonin, and they end up with more dementia. Every hour per day spent in front of media entertainment increases your risk of Alzheimer's by 30%. So if you're watching TV 2 hours a day, that's a 60% higher risk of Alzheimer's. And I think the average amount that people spend watching TV is 4.5 hours or something like that. So it's television, movies, YouTube, video games, computer time, whatever.
So are you controlling how much time you're using in front of the computer?
Well, I'm trying to spend more time outside working in the garden. That's for sure. But notice it's media entertainment. And so it has not only to do with the medium, electronic device, but also the stress of entertainment. Most entertainment is the hero of the plot is either in trouble, getting in trouble, or getting out of trouble. And it's always a stress. So that plays into it. But it's also the blue light, too much blue light. It's not real good for you, that's for sure. Yeah. And then there's the whole factor of electromagnetic fields. People who use cell phones, hold them to their head. If you hold a cell phone to your head for half an hour, it raises the temperature of your brain by 0.5 degree. It works like a microwave oven. And it causes a blood-brain barrier breakdown. It causes disruption of your calcium channels in your brain, part of the signaling process of your brain. It increases your likelihood of all kinds of problems, and cancer especially. But here we're focusing on Alzheimer's. And so if you're having trouble with Alzheimer's, discard the phone, use a hands-free speakerphone that's wired into your house, not a cell phone, not a mobile phone, and certainly not wireless phones, cordless phones.
I'm very sensitive to EMF, so I put a cap with silver threads on when I have to speak in the phone, and I cover myself with a blanket with stainless steel. But still I get the rays just into my face, even if I keep the phone in front of me. But I have been very strict to myself lately, and my headache is nearly gone. I think we should be much, much aware about these cell phones. When I speak to people, I say, can we go on Zoom? Can we go on Messenger? That's at least I don't react on that.
Yeah. Just like here, I can, I'm standing a little ways away from my computer. I don't have to be real close to it. And when I use my computer, I put it up on a pedestal so it's at my eye level, and I put it out in front of me a ways, and then I use a separate mouse. I plug the mouse into my computer so I can be farther away from me. I use a keyboard instead of the keyboard on the laptop. You know, the more distance you can put between you and the electronic device, the lower the impact on you.
So do you think it helps to have a pad? Now it's very popular with grounding, and some people buy these grounding pads to have under the computer. Does that help on it?
There's definitely a lot of EMF under the computer. If you get an EMF meter and you check where the EMF is, it's highest on the bottom of the computer. And if you have any shielding, it's more effective if it's grounded. So if I put up a aluminum shield or a stainless steel grid shield, and I run a wire to the ground, it'll have a lot better effect at neutralizing the EMF than if it's not grounded. And so definitely grounding. For grounding yourself, I've had people who, unless they grounded themselves, they get seizures if they're around cell phones or other sources of the EMF. But if they were grounded, they wouldn't. So there's some practical application of that.
I'm saying I'm sitting here holding on my grounding pad.
Yeah, no, there's nothing. That's and the farther you can live away from all, so if you go to a city and you turn on your computer and you look for a Wi-Fi, there'll be so many it won't even be room enough to have them on one screen. Everybody has their own Wi-Fi because everybody's just locked up so nobody else can get on it. So when you're in a city, you're just being bombarded by, you know, electromagnetic fields everywhere. The farther you get out in the
even in hospitals, you know, they have 5G. It's the most dangerous place to be in anyways.
Oh, yeah, and they have all these wireless devices, wireless Holter monitors that monitor your heart, wireless, yeah, all kinds of wireless. And then they have cell phone repeaters in the hospital, so all the doctors can answer their cell phones. And then, you know, hospitals are a radiation source, and yeah, scary. Physical activity helps prevent Alzheimer's changes in your brain. This is where we need to start getting into the cures. We've talked about a lot of the problems. Now we got to talk about the cures. And there's even people out there, researchers and some journalists, looking into the fact that exercise helps counteract the EMF too. It's one of the few things that helps in that regard. So physical activity, best exercise times are before breakfast. And why is that? Because it helps wake you up. It helps get you outside where there's fresh air, negative ions, pink rays from the sun. Those are all good in the morning. Immediately after each meal, so your blood doesn't all stagnate to your stomach and leave your brain high and dry. You want to be out there getting some exercise, keeping the blood flowing regularly. Walking is the best exercise that has been shown to improve brain function and increase memory and reduce the risk of dementia. A lifestyle with, oh, so did you say something?
There came in a written question here. If you can talk a little bit about how to ground in the best way, or how to ground.
So I don't know how it is over there, but over here, there's two good places to ground in a house. One is if you have metal water pipes that go from your house into the ground. And so they might be under your sink, or they might be in your bathroom, or they might be anywhere under your house. You just have to look under your house and see where they are, and you might have to, you know, run a wire down to them. That's one good place to ground. Another good place to ground your grounding pad too is in our electrical outlets over here. We have 3 prongs, and in our 3 prongs, 2 are the load and the ground, but the third one is the neutral. I'm sorry, 2 are the neutral and the load, and the other one's the ground. And so if we make a plug that will just plug a wire into the ground, then we can ground. And what happens in our houses is the ground wire goes to the central distribution panel, and then it goes down to a rod that sticks in the ground 10 feet. I mean, otherwise, you can just buy one of these 10-foot grounding rods and pound it in the ground somewhere and run a wire out to it. That would be a good way of grounding. Then whatever you use to ground yourself, it could be as non-commercial and homemade as, sitting on a sheet of aluminum foil and using an alligator clip with a wire going to your chosen ground. Or you can buy these fancy pads or fancy metal plates. The more comfortable one would be to buy a cloth that has metal in it. You can buy cloth with silver wire in it for blocking EMF. You could also use that for grounding. And what you do then is you put an alligator clip with a wire going to your ground on that cloth, and then you sit on that cloth or put that cloth over you. And the closer that cloth can be to your skin, if it can contact your skin, the more effect you'll have. But even because it is electromagnetic fields, even being outside your clothing, it will neutralize some of the electromagnetic fields, even if you aren't bare skinned against it. Some purists would buy EKG pads and put them on themselves and put it to a ground. That's kind of a sticky pad that has high electroconductivity and a wire coming off of it. You could hook that to a ground. That would be absolute ground. So our friend had seizures if he got near cell phones and didn't ground. He would carry a little iron pipe as his grounding device, and he would keep it on the ground and keep his hand on it. That's what he did, and seemed to keep him from going into seizures from the EMF around his community. So there you go. All right, a healthy lifestyle with daily outdoor activity reduces dementia. Countries with lower average sunlight have higher Alzheimer's death rates. For our country, it would be Oregon would have higher Alzheimer's because there's a lot more clouds, whereas other places, Maine actually has a lot of sunlight, the opposite coast. Outdoor air improves mental performance because it's got less toxins like formaldehyde from paint and insulation boards and plastics. Physical activity combined with mental exercise, as in gardening. Wow, here we go. Head back to Garden of Eden, aren't we? Yeah, Garden of Eden provided our ecological niche would be the garden. And that's where we have the best health. And it helps provide us with physical activity and mental exercise, chasing the bugs off our plants, fertilizing our plants. Good hydration. People who get dehydrated, they have memory issues. Start the day off with a liter of water. Men need 3.7 liters a day. Women need 2.7 liters a day. And being well hydrated is certainly key to having better brain function. Another thing you can do is hydrotherapy. And this would be like hot and cold treatments. Start the morning off with a cool sponge bath. This greatly stimulates the nerves, greatly enhances brain activity. It wakes you up. In my estimation, it's better than coffee. I've never drinking coffee, but I've certainly done a morning's cool sponge bath, and it woke me wide awake. Hot and cold showers invigorate your brain circulation. Hot and cold treatments to the head is what we do for people with serious Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Right now, I'm dealing with 2 Parkinson's patients, and we're doing this hot and cold treatment to the head. I'll just describe it here. So what we do is we lay the patient down. It's easier. We put the back of their head on one temperature and the front of the head on the opposite temperature. I usually start out with hot on the forehead and cold, like ice pack with a towel over it, on the back of the head. And I do that for 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, I switch so that the cold is in the front and the hot is the back. And like I say, they're laying down, so it's easy. So you can just leave them. I don't have to hold them there. Then every 3 minutes, switch. Every 3 minutes, switch. What this does is when the hot's in the front, the blood predominates from the carotid arteries. When the hot's in the back, the blood predominates from the vertebral arteries. So when the hot's in the back, the blood flow in the brain is going to be more back to front. When the hot's in the front, the brain blood flow is going to be more from front to back. And so what you're doing is you're improving blood flow through the brain. Improved blood flow, perfect health depends on perfect circulation. We're trying to improve the circulation, and we've had great results with Alzheimer's, closed head injury, stroke patients, multiple sclerosis, these different brain issues.
So is there something in this, John? Some people say that it will be beneficial to lay on the floor and have your feet up for about 20 minutes.
Well, it would certainly increase the blood pressure to your head, that's for sure. I don't know that I know any studies on that. I haven't looked for that, but now that you've mentioned that, I can go look and see if there's anything about posture or body position and Alzheimer's. So I'll make myself a note. That's interesting. They have those inversion tables, but they kind of became unpopular when they increased the stroke rate. These tables that you can hang upside down from. Use it or lose it. This is a principle. And people who have lots of mental activity reduce their risk of dementia. Notice that low mental activity is high dementia. People with more education, people with more mental demand in their jobs have less dementia. And so reading, discussing, studying, word games, trivia, jobs that require lots of thinking, these help keep your brain active and keep you from getting dementia. Learning new things. Every time you learn something new, you establish a new brain network, which could be bypassing damaged areas in your brain. And so the damaged areas in your brain can happen from stroke. They can happen from blood clots. They can happen from neurofibrillary tangles, Alzheimer's. When you have Alzheimer's and you scan the brain, there's sort of white spots that we call Alzheimer's lesions. Anyway. And really, you want to have a lifelong learning program. And the best thing you can do for learning is Bible study. What kind of Bible study? Comparing text with text. It exercises your association cortex. Example would be studying, let's say, for example, rest. We know that the seventh day is a day for rest. Well, Jesus said, "Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Okay, so Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath too. That's another association. In Hebrews, it talks about there remaineth a rest to the people of God, describing rest as a description of salvation. In Revelation, it talks about that the wicked do not rest in the third angel's message, but right after that, it says that blessed are they that die in the Lord, for they shall rest. And so there's all these different things. If you take, so in other words, you're taking one topic, one word, and you're associating it. You're exercising the brain. You're looking for everywhere it's in the Bible. It's Bible study that will help build your brain and help you not to get dementia. Memory exercises pay off. What's an example of a memory exercise? Well, one example is what they call mnemonics. It's down there toward the end of that sentence there. Mnemonic is another simple way of saying mnemonics is memory pegs. What's an example of memory pegs? It's coming up with external ways of remembering things. For example, one memory peg system makes a rhyme out of the first 20 numbers. 1 run, 2 zoo, 3 tree, 4 door, 5 high. And then when they want to remember something, number 1 on the list, 1 run. And they picture in their mind the item they want to remember sitting in the saddle of a horse running around a horse track or a racetrack. And then when they want to recall, they remember their item bouncing in the seat of that saddle, running around the horse track. 2 zoo, they think of a couple monkeys throwing the item they want to remember back and forth. That's mnemonics or memory pegs. Those kind of things, how anything you do to try to make your memory better, that will actually make your memory better. So object lessons, blackboards, maps, figures, symbols, songs, pictures, anything that where you're actively trying to improve your memory will in the long run help stave off dementia. When I first put this talk together, I had counseled a couple, a family, whose father and husband was coming down with dementia. He was forgetting. It wasn't bothering him. That's one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's. The patient themselves isn't worried about it. Anyway, he was forgetting things, and mom was like, he's getting forgetful. We can't trust him. And so I'd put him on a program like we're talking about here. So when I put this talk together, I said, well, I ought to chase him down and find out if we did him any good. If we didn't do him any good, maybe our system needs some tuning up. So I called him up and I said, how you doing? How's it going? We talked a bit, and I said, how's dad? I mean, we remember we talked about his Alzheimer's. They said, oh, as long as he stays on his lifestyle and diet, he's perfect. If he goes out and, gets into some fast food, it's another story. But as long as we can keep him on the straight and narrow, he's good. And so, yeah, it works. Now, another thing that will lead to dementia is stress. Now, I'm going to take and grab my water just a minute. As we said, hydration helps stave off Alzheimer's. All right, psychological stress predicts Alzheimer's. Stress is really about your emotions, how you respond to situations. It's your reaction to stimuli. Why do I say that? Different people have different reactions to different stimuli. What stresses one person may not stress another. So it really has to do with your ability to cope with irregularities in your environment. So people who find everything stressful are more likely to get dementia. How does it work? When you get more psychological stress, the cortisol goes up in your body and in your brain. Cortisol has the ability to wipe out neurons out of your hippocampus, your memory center of your brain. Now, you can replace cells in your brain. Your brain does replace cells, but the new cells can't remember what happened before they came into existence. And so we say you repressed the memory, but really you lost those cells that had that information in them. Emotional health. So really, stress is about emotions, and so we need to talk about emotional health. People with better emotional health have better memories. So what's a good example of good emotional health? How about the fruits of the Spirit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There you go. Good, positive emotions. And happiness improves your memory. And people who have gratitude and happiness see their past as better, as not so worrisome as people who always are on the negative side or depressed. A merry heart doth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. Another thing that helps is having many friends. Notice my chart here. People with more friends, they do not have any cognitive decline. They actually improve. People with few friends have a steady decline. So isolated people who don't go out much and don't have much social interactions, much more likely to get dementia. And so really it's about social skills. How do you practice social skills? Well, you can follow the one another text. Love one another, accept one another, pray for one another. There's a lot of them. I'm just listing a few here. Honor one another, encourage one another, carry one another's burdens, and serve one another. There's a whole list for you. All right. Now, preserve your intellectual capacity by volunteering. When you do good for other people, it does good for you. Volunteers experience 1/4 the intellectual decline over a 1-year period compared to non-volunteers. So, yeah, this morning I was out volunteering with our church members, cleaning up people's yards. It's good to be helpful to others. When you help others, you help yourself. So there's a chart showing 1/4 the mental decline. So remember our lady that moved from Florida back to Michigan and got back on a good diet? You can reverse Alzheimer's if it hasn't gone too far. And it's better not to let it go anywhere at all. In summary, healthy eating nurtures a healthy brain. You are what you eat, we say. Ellen White says you are made up of what you eat. It's probably a better way of thinking it. Exercise, physical and mental, promotes a vigorous brain. Psychological and social health supports an active brain. Putting our recommendations down on one sheet: eat fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, but don't overeat. Limit or avoid animal products and fatty foods and fermented foods and processed foods and chemicalized foods. Eat only at scheduled meal times and eat very little, if any, in the evening. Take time daily for vigorous exercise in the great outdoors, in the fresh air and sunshine, and in as natural an environment as possible. I guess I didn't stress that, but people who exercise out in a natural environment have less brain decline than those who do it in the city. Useful, purposeful labor is the very best. Drink plenty of fresh, pure water. Avoid heavy metals, chemicals, pesticides, MSG, herbicides. Keep your mind active and challenged every day. Make friends and build social networks. Take steps to manage stress effectively, and take advantage of the help God can give you in living to the fullest, free from stress and worry. All right, there you go. And if you go to my website, northernlightshealtheducation.com, you can go there to the button on the left that says presentation handouts. And on that page, there'll be a handout for this lecture, Keeping Your Mind Sharp. If you go down to YouTube channel, or I have another button that isn't pictured on this. I guess I need to update this. That has Zoom topics, and you can rewatch me giving this to some other group a while back. Anyway, it's been good being with you. Is there any last few questions, or have we covered them all as we went?
Oh, thank you so much, John. Now you have been serving us, and I think many people will watch this program. So thank you so much. I have learned much, and now it's to change a few things, and I'm sure that we all have been very much blessed. So maybe we should close with a prayer.
Yes, let's have a word of prayer before we go. Dear Father in heaven, we've been talking about our brains. Lord, you've given us these brains that distinguish us from a monkey or an animal. Very highly technical organ. Lord, you've said we need to understand how to preserve our vessels before you. And Lord, we pray that we will preserve our brains, that the better we can think, the better we can comprehend you, the better we can grow in our spiritual experience. Lord, bless us to that end. Help each one of us to improve in our lifestyles in the ways that we've learned today. Give us courage to do that and strength that we can benefit. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.